Hello, this is Levi Wampler with MMAStrikingCoach.com. Today we're speaking with Cameron Conaway, author of the book Caged, Memoirs of a Cage Fighting Poet. If you'd like to learn more about him, you can visit him at CameronConaway.com. How are you doing today, Cameron?
I'm good, Levi. How are you?
I'm doing real good. Now, could you tell us a little bit how you got your start in the martial arts?
Sure. I was 13, I'd say, and undersized, point guard. And I was wandering through the porn section at a Blockbuster looking to see what that was all about. And right on my way back there, I found a VHS tape of Ken Shamrock on the cover. And it was UFC 3, I think, the Brawl in Buffalo where he fought Oleg Taktarov. And, in those days, they put the UFC videotapes back by the porn. It was like this mature-rated thing. I made a call home to Mom, and I said, hey, I want to get this martial arts movie. She had no idea. She just thought it was probably Bruce Lee jumping around. And she said, yeah. And I took it home, and I remember I had blisters on my thumbs from using the remote so much for like 3 days straight. I was just floored by just the level of talent that I was watching. I think just the complexity of all the moves and literally like a couple weeks later, I quit basketball and I joined the nonprofit boxing club we had in town in Altoona, Pennsylvania. We didn't have a MMA school, so I ended up reading Ken Shamrock's book and felt like, well, I need to start in something, and I didn't want to try to do Taekwondo or something. I wanted to do something I felt would be a little more practical, and I jumped into that, and it was a great experience. And Ken kind of, he didn't know it at the time, but he filled in as a father figure for me when my own father was non-existent. So I found this passion, and I also got a father figure out of it, and I pursued the passion and wrote the book and had 3 pro fights, and I love the sport. It's a huge part of my life now.
That's awesome. When did you have your pro fights?
Man, that was a while ago.
It's been a while. Okay.
No, I'm thinking it was before grad school. I went to grad school for creative writing, so 2007. I had 3 fights in Ohio because they were illegal in Pennsylvania at the time.
Wow.
But living in Pennsylvania meant that I was about a 5-hour drive to the Renzo Gracie Academy. So I would work in the produce department at a local grocery store, save up money, and then when I got a couple off days during the month, I would get in my car at 3 a.m. and head to Manhattan and train with Renzo and John Danaher and all the amazing fighters they were always bringing in. So I ended up picking up the grappling game, but it all started with boxing,
You're currently in Thailand. Are you training while you're there?
I trained for the first, I'd say 7 months that I was here, pretty hardcore in Muay Thai. Obviously, that was a dream of mine since I was young, was to get here and train Muay Thai.
Right.
So, my fiance wanted to teach abroad. She was all about Thailand, and I said, well, I think I could be okay over there too. And but I trained, pretty much every day for 6 or 7 months. I met Master Toddy and all the big name Muay Thai coaches and fighters, and it's just a different climate here. Like fighting is in the air. Football is in the air in America.
Right.
As much as I love MMA, it's a football, baseball type of place. Fighting is Thailand, man. Like the little kids when they're 3, you don't give them a basketball. Like their parents give them little boxing gloves and they fight each other. It's been such an interesting experience just living here even.
No, I bet it would be incredible. I've talked to a couple people that have been able to do it, doing these interviews, and they can't say enough good things about training over there.
Yeah. I think a big part of it is it's also the weakness. The weakness is there's a serious lack of organization when it comes to training here.
Yeah.
Because they are born learning the kicks and learning the punches. They don't have a sort of standardized curriculum that you do at different martial arts schools, even boxing schools, where you first learn footwork. Here, they kind of watch how you move, and they just go from there, whatever they see that you need to work on.
Huh.
But they also allow you to spar much earlier than most places do, I think, in America. I mean, third or fourth day you're in there, and so I think the emphasis on sparring is a big plus because it's safe sparring, and you can do all the drills in the world, and you can look like Muhammad Ali on the bags, but when punches are coming your way, if you're not used to that dynamic, you're going to look silly. So I think that's a big positive here.
Okay. Now, speaking of drills, I mean, besides sparring, obviously, do you have a drill or an exercise that you could tell us about?
As far as drills, I found the biggest thing that I worked on here was not blinking when punches come your way, and people laugh. But I had solid mechanics with footwork, with my various jabs, with my push kicks, the way I was turning my hips over with my kicks. Everything was pretty solid, but when leather was flying, man, I would grit my teeth and like scrunch up and tighten up. And so, and you can do a lot of different slipping drills, but I think it comes with time. It comes with having sparring partners that you can trust. Mm-hmm. And but a lot of slipping drills, I think I would have done that a lot more in America had I known. I don't know. I guess just the striking dynamic here, the way you just jump right into sparring. Mm-hmm. I thought we'd learn all the slips to different punches first, and then drill them. But you just kind of get thrown in here. So as far as a drill, I think the best drill is to have a sparring partner that you can drill with, and that would be my tip for that.
No, it's a good one. Like you say, not getting too tense when you're fighting and not blinking so you can actually respond to the punches. That's pretty important stuff. Yeah,
and it was, a big thing here is being able to step in towards the punch. Mm-hmm. It's much different than boxing where you can kind of Floyd Mayweather and roll your shoulders. And here it's very effective if you're able to just step in towards the punch and away from it at the same time. Mm-hmm. It keeps you planted, and you're able to deliver knees. You don't have to work. Like, I would roll my shoulders, and all their punches would slip off me, but I was never in a position where I could immediately come back with a clinch, or I was usually off balance, and they were able to land kicks. And mm-hmm. I love the shoulder roll, but your lead leg when you do that shoulder roll is going to get tore up if you use that too much in Thailand.
Right. That's a different game.
Oh, it is. It is. So, but I think being able to step into the punch when it's coming mm-hmm. is it's counterintuitive. You're used to trying to get away from it, but to have to go towards the fire just takes patience. And I think that's some of the best advice I've ever had was consistency is king. Mm-hmm. And I remember Evander Holyfield would just preach that, literally. He would talk about Jesus afterwards, but he would always say consistency is king. And, I would be like, yeah, but it really is. I mean, just, for your neurons and everything, just to be able to flow smoothly. Like Malcolm Gladwell wrote that book about, 10,000 hours to achieve maximum efficiency and all these things, but there really is something to it. I don't know if you can put a number on it, but coming back day in and day out is so much better than going gung-ho for 4 days a week and, having a bunch of off days or overtraining or anything. Just as long as you're there and getting some work done, I think that's how you can grow. Mm-hmm.
Your book, Caged Memoirs for a Cage Fighting Poet, is about your life in the cage. Can you tell us maybe a favorite story from the book?
Sure. I think I brought up Henzo Gracie earlier. There's a mm-hmm. pretty hilarious story in the book. I told you I was saving money working in the produce department. So, Henzo, his place is, I think, 2 blocks from Madison Square Garden. So there's no way I could afford a hotel there. So, I would train with him. I would get there at like 7:30 in the morning, and his personality is just unbelievable. And I try to capture it in the book, but he's the kind of guy where he's either like, he smiles 22 hours of the day, the other 2 hours of the day he trains, and he's like an animal. He just laughs all the time. Like, as soon as you walk into the gym, welcome my brother, how are you? And just makes you feel at home. But there's a story in there where I don't know what, I went to cheaptickets.com or something and got the cheapest hotel I could find, and it was in New Jersey. And right when I walked into the door, 4 or 5 prostitutes came walking out, and there was greasy hair product on the bed, and there's just a lot of unspeakable things. But it was funny. It wasn't funny at the time because I trained with Enzo for like 8 hours. I was exhausted. I just wanted a clean place to get home to. But in hindsight, it's hilarious, and I think I captured a bit of that in the book.
That does sound pretty good. What are some of the mistakes you think people make when they're entering their first MMA fight?
That's a good question. I actually have been kind of, I think the process of the book has forced me to meditate on some things. And when I started thinking about that question, what are the mistakes that I made? One mistake is overtraining, because you have so much fear, and you fight fear with fire. You fight fear by training as hard as you possibly can. And it's very hard to relax. And it's very hard to say, I'm going to take a break today, because you start to feel lazy.
Right.
That's another thing where it's consistency is king. Are you getting in there every day? Are you trying to make improvements? And it's not just physical improvements. Are you studying videotapes? Are you reading different books? Are you watching the most recent fights? Because this sport is evolving so fast. So I think the mistake that I made was I totally overtrained, and I mean physically and mentally. I mean, I was simply not able to recover from my workouts. And any off time that I had, I was watching film, and it got to the point where I think it was about a week before my first fight. I was so sick of MMA. I hated it. I can honestly say I hated it. And but I ended up winning my first fight, and I think it's because I was obsessed. But I also think I was very lucky. I could have come down with a major flu before the fight because my immune system was depressed, it's something that I've tried to lecture, and I've tried to teach people that I've trained not to go to that place of overtraining, but they do. They don't know how else to prepare for a fight with such few rolls where you can get hurt. Right. And I've talked to many guys, and they said, I'm preparing this hard so I don't get hurt. I want to have my flexibility levels up. I want to be able to defend myself. It's not so they can deliver like all this damage. They want to get in and have this fight and just be okay and go home afterwards. And that's my advice. I've been preaching it for several years now, but I think it's going to happen. I think that first fight is going to happen unless you've been into martial arts from the very beginning, or you've wrestled from the very beginning and you're used to that feeling of competition.
That's a good point. I mean, like, you get the jitters, and like you say, you don't want to get hurt, and you want to do well, and you want to do well in front of your family or your friends if they're going to be out there. So you just have to do everything you can think of.
Oh, I mean, there's parts in the book where I wrote about how it turned into such an obsession that I wouldn't let any second go by where I wasn't training somehow, and including like sitting on the toilet.
Right.
I felt like it was wasted time if I sat on the toilet and wasn't reading Eddie Bravo's book on the rubber guard, or Duke Roufus' striking manual or something like. And obviously, you can see how it would get to the point where you start to hate it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those nervous jitters, they're going to come too. There's not much you can do about it.
Now, you said you've been through a lot of books and DVDs. Can you recommend anything or workout equipment you think everybody should read? Can we maybe narrow the focus down for these guys as they're preparing?
Yeah. I am a huge proponent of Bikram yoga at this point. So it's kind of, it's not equipment. Maybe I can say a yoga mat, but Bikram yoga is, in my opinion, the single best thing that you can do to improve your fight game without actually fighting, without actually doing a martial art. I feel like I can have my cardiovascular system tested, my flexibility tested, balance tested, my breath tested while I'm in weird positions, which often happens during MMA fights. My sense of awareness in space where I am. All these kind of things mimic striking, mimic jiu-jitsu. And I found that when I was sparring here in Thailand, I was able to just use my jab and keep a lot of the Thai fighters totally off balance. They weren't able to throw push kicks. They weren't able to turn their hips over into anything, because as soon as I saw that coming, I had a jab in their face. And it was because I sort of developed this kind of long, lean Bruce Lee type of striking, and it was in large part to Bikram. A lot of the stretches you do really strengthen your back, your entire spinal column. And it's a lot different than doing bench press all the time and building this huge chest that makes you tight. So I found that if you pile muscle on in your back, which Bikram can do, it doesn't decrease your range of motion in any way when it comes to striking. So, huge on Bikram. I loved Eddie Bravo's books, to be honest. As a smaller fighter, being able to use flexibility is huge, and a lot of smaller fighters don't know how to. I think that's an advantage that smaller fighters actually need to have in order to counter some strength. When you're crumpled into a ball and you're fighting with strength to try to get out of it, you're just playing into your opponent's game. And there's a lot of different stretches in Eddie Bravo's book and a lot of different moves that rely on flexibility. So yeah, I'm really, really big on that. DVDs, Duke Roufus has an awesome striking DVD on Muay Thai. I've watched a bunch, but his is by far the best. It's so simple. He talks about what I was talking about earlier with stepping into the punches and actually stepping into the kicks. When you block a kick with your shin, stepping into it so that you don't fall off balance. If you just lift your leg up, which I did when I first got here, I would just lift my leg up to check a kick. They kick here, it's like a baseball bat coming at you. So if you just lift your leg, I mean, honestly, they just run through you. So if I would move forward and meet that baseball bat with my own, I was set and I felt like in a position to for a counter right hand or a left hook or something. But Duke's videos is phenomenal with just very simple, basic techniques. And there's a lot of Muay Thai videos that are like, I don't know, I think they're a little too flashy. They maybe tried to market too hard or try to be too cool. But Duke's like, it's such simple movements, and you're like, man, that totally makes sense. It just mechanically makes sense. And if you want to learn about the obsession, the OCD that can grow from MMA, a ton of different weird ways to train. My book, obviously, I think would be good for that. So there's a plug for Caged. Yeah, but definitely Eddie Bravo, Duke Roufus, and Bikram. So it's like all you need in life.
That's a pretty good list. We've been hearing about the Bikram from some of the conditioning people that I've interviewed.
Okay.
And I own the Duke Roufus DVDs. Those are really good.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, your book, I mean, you've got a long list of testimonials here from people that liked it. Jim Arvanitis we've interviewed, Ken Shamrock, said he was inspired by it. I mean, and if you go to the Amazon.com page or Barnes & Noble, either way, there's all kinds of good reviews here. So
yeah, I mean, it's I've been telling people it's a good Christmas gift, but it's not a good Christmas Day read. I talk a lot about the abuse that I went through as a child and different things, but I feel, looking back on it, I do feel like I accomplished something in fusing mixed martial arts with literary writing that hasn't been done before. So I think I really got inside the mind of what it's like to be preparing for a first fight. Like you asked my first question. So I think that it could really help somebody who's serious about, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually go ahead and fight. It could help prepare them for some of the emotions they might feel.
That's really good, because I think some people aren't ready for that. Like you said, everybody kind of freaks out and we start overtraining and doing too much because we're just not ready for it. I mean, people are, we don't like to actually fight. I mean, it's fun to spar, it's fun to train, but,
true.
Oh,
I've talked to so many people who wanted to have a fight and then something came up, or they got, they overtrained and they got sick, or they weren't willing to have their diet tight enough to drop into a weight class that was best for them. Like you said, you don't have to worry about any of that when you're sparring at the gym.
Yeah.
You don't have, who cares what weight class, you can pretty much eat what you want. Obviously your performance will be a little bit affected, but when it's a serious fight, there's somebody else out there training for you. I mean, you take it to another level, so.
Yeah, can you give us some of the best advice your mentors have ever given you, just any advice about life or business or anything that you think people need to know?
I'll tell you what, I taught creative writing in a juvenile detention center, and the woman who introduced me, and I was studying poetry at the time in grad school, and she said, he's an MMA fighter and he's a poet, he's the warrior poet, and it freaking stuck, and I'm still going with it. And a lot of mentors at the time said that they saw me have this fusion of mind and body from the time they knew me. And so the only advice that I can give is advice that I have lived and that I found to be successful, and that is whatever you're doing with your body, whatever kind of development you're doing towards that, think of something that can be reciprocal for your mind also. Otherwise you're going to get stagnant, I think. As a person, you're going to get bored with what you're doing physically. Like I'm taking Thai language classes now, learning how to write in Thai. And it's been a great counter to the Bikram and whatever training I'm doing. So I think having that, it's kind of the yin-yang principle, but having a balance of mind and body has been some of the best advice I've had.
That's pretty good. Sometimes as physical people, we get hung up doing too much physical. We just forget about the mental side of things. Yeah,
I mean, it's the form of training too. Again, there's there's a bathtub scene in the book where it was partly mental training because I didn't have any sparring partners to grapple with. So I would hold my breath underwater in the bathtub of my house and pretend like I was in guard, or somebody had me mounted, and it was totally just trying to play mental tricks with myself. And I look back on it now, it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but it did tap into some sort of primal mental capacity that I didn't know I had, and it definitely helped me. So focus on the mental. That we were at a basketball game for Texas A&M, and all the halftime show was split between the players dunking and like 7-year-old kids who won a reading award, and everybody was cheering for the players that were dunking, and nobody was cheering for these little kids who won who read the most books for the school year. So I stood up and I was like, literacy rules. And then a couple other people followed suit. It was pretty cool, but I'm a huge proponent. Yeah, whatever you're doing physically, try to balance it somehow. Training your brain.
That's been great. This is Levi Wampler for MMA Striking Coach. Today we've been speaking with Cameron Conaway, author of Caged, Memoirs of a Cage Fighting Poet. Thank you for speaking with us today. Got a frog on my
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.